The castle is heavily guarded, with sentries stationed at every corner. From atop a towering tree, a lone figure watches in silence, a man driven solely by vengeance for his fallen clan. Without hesitation, he infiltrates the demonic sect's territory and eliminates a sentry. Knowing the disappearance will soon be discovered, he quickly advances deeper into the stronghold. At the heart of the sect, the leader, known as the Heavenly Demon, sits calmly in meditation. One by one, his subordinates fall, yet he remains completely unfazed. To him, such losses are insignificant distractions on the path to martial supremacy. Soon, the Avenger finally arrives after taking down every obstacle in his way. His name is Kong Wenshin, and he has come to personally end the Heavenly Demon's life. A fierce battle begins instantly, but the Heavenly Demon proves overwhelmingly powerful. Even so, Kong refuses to fall easily. With a fierce strike fueled by rage, he manages to break through the demon's steel-like defense and land a solid hit. Declaring that he carries the wrath of countless victims, Kong continues to fight with everything he has. However, the Heavenly Demon, far from defeated, chooses to push his limits further. He consumes an entire bottle of elixir, triggering a dangerous demonic chi deviation that drastically amplifies his strength. Now radiating overwhelming power, his mere presence is enough to make Kong tremble. As the Heavenly Demon prepares to deliver a fatal blow, a mysterious barrier suddenly appears, blocking the attack at the last moment. The one who intervenes is a great mage who claims to have come from another world, an unexpected twist that completely disrupts the traditional Murim setting. This bizarre development leaves Jean, the reader of the story, feeling unimpressed and confused, making him lose interest in the novel altogether. Shifting to reality, we learn about Jean, a 23-year-old who was discharged from military service 6 months ago and is now preparing to return to college. Although he once had a clear plan to earn certifications and focus on his studies, he gradually drifted away after realizing how much of normal life he had missed. As a fan of Murim stories, Jean often found himself immersed in fantasies of becoming a protagonist in such a world. During his service, he casually played a game called Loyal Ground, but after his discharge, he began taking it seriously. Within just 3 months, Jean climbed to become a top 10 ranked player, even earning small amounts of money through internet cafe tournaments. The game features a survival format where 100 players drop into a map, gather weapons, and compete until only one remains. In one match, Jean teams up with a friend and quickly eliminates 2 opponents. As the number of players dwindles, Jean chooses a cautious approach, focusing on survival until the final safe zone. Eventually, they discover an unlooted house, but his teammate rushes in recklessly and falls into a trap, getting eliminated. Despite this, Jean stays composed, defeats the final opponent, and secures victory. Although tempted to continue playing, Jean checks the time and decides to start focusing on his studies from the next day. Shortly after, he receives a message from his mother regarding his academy fees and some additional money. Feeling a sense of guilt, Jean informs his teammate that he will stop playing and begin attending an English academy. Later that night, Jean returns to his apartment and scrolls through videos online, coming across a mysterious clip about unusual figures spotted overseas. However, the video is abruptly deleted, leaving him puzzled. Brushing it off, he goes to sleep. The next morning, Jean gets ready for his first day at the academy. However, his gaming partner once again asks for help with a clan war. Jean agrees to assist one last time, but in that very moment, a strange purple light appears behind him. Confused, he turns to look, only for the light to intensify rapidly. Within seconds, the glow engulfs him completely, and Jean vanishes without a trace. At first, Jean can't see anything at all, leaving him wondering if this is some kind of punishment for neglecting his studies. However, the darkness suddenly fades, revealing a bright sky and a crowd of people dressed in elaborate, costume-like outfits. As he regains consciousness, Gene questions whether he is dreaming. Looking around, he notices that everyone is gathered in front of a strange statue. Without warning, a voice echoes in their minds, announcing that 100 players have been detected. The statue's eyes glow blue as the system initializes, followed by a complete language synchronization that allows everyone to understand one another. Tension quickly rises among the group. Some people demand answers, others accuse each other, and arguments break out. One elf even launches an attack on another person, but despite the strike landing, the target feels no pain. This only convinces the elf that the man might be responsible for bringing them here. Observing the chaos, Gene realizes the situation feels far too realistic to be a dream. Moments later, the system announces the start of the game. The difficulty is set to easy, and the objective is to rank within the top 90 players. The selected map is the capital of the King Kingdom, and rewards will be granted to those who place in the top 10. The system also clarifies that all attacks in the waiting area are neutralized, preventing any real harm for now. A detailed map appears before each participant, followed by an explanation for first-time players of Cloyd survival. The game will last 100 days, with the playable area shrinking each day. Leaving the designated zone will result in serious consequences, so players must remain cautious. The match will continue until only one survivor remains. Those eliminated, or those who complete the game, will return to their original world. However, anyone who fails to reach the top 90 will lose the opportunity to participate again. The system then announces that players will soon descend to their chosen locations using Gaze, where they can gather items to improve their chances of survival. Hearing all this, Gene is stunned, initially believing he is simply dreaming about a game similar to Loyal Ground. Yet the realism and presence of others make him uneasy. Even if this is a dream, he has no intention of losing his life. As Gene contemplates his survival, a man in armor approaches him, questioning why he keeps looking around and demanding to know where he is from. Before Gene can respond, the system announces that the game will begin in 3 seconds. Gene smirks, and just before the countdown ends, he taunts the man, confident that his experience and knowledge of similar games will give him the upper hand. The provocation angers the man, but the match begins immediately. In an instant, all players are lifted into the air and transported toward their selected locations. Many choose to descend into crowded areas filled with valuable items, but Gene decides to land on the outskirts, prioritizing safety over risk. Upon landing, he feels intense motion sickness but pushes through it and heads toward a nearby house, hoping to secure a weapon before encountering any enemies. As he approaches, he hears a suspicious noise and quickly rushes inside, shutting the door behind him. Exhausted, he briefly worries that the sword-wielding man from earlier might have followed him. After checking through the window and finding no one, he assumes it was just the wind and begins searching the house. While exploring, Gene accidentally kicks into a heavy crossbow on the floor. Though difficult to handle, he recognizes it as a valuable find. The moment he equips it, knowledge of how to use it naturally flows into his mind. Drawing from his military experience, he tests the weapon, but the powerful recoil sends him stumbling back into the wall. Despite the surprise, he realizes how effective the crossbow could be once mastered. After searching the house further and finding nothing else useful, Gene heads outside to explore more buildings. With no enemies in sight, he takes the opportunity to gather resources safely. Entering another house, he carefully scans the area before spotting a scroll. Curious, he picks it up and learns that it is a healing scroll capable of restoring injuries when activated. Pleased with the discovery, Gene hopes to find more recovery items, and possibly an item bag. Continuing his search, he notices a faint purple glow coming from a nearby library. Investigating further, he discovers a martial arts manual titled Black Starchy Palms, an ability that allows the user to project hidden weapons through their fingers. The system prompts him to confirm whether he wants to learn it, and Gene immediately agrees. At once, the book rises into the air, its pages flipping rapidly before dissolving into fragments of light. These fragments flow into Jin's fingers, and he feels a noticeable change in his hands. To test his new ability, he picks up a fork and throws it toward the wall. The fork embeds itself firmly into the surface, demonstrating the power of his newly acquired skill, leaving Gene both surprised and excited as he takes his first real step. Gene couldn't help but feel excited. If martial arts books exist in this survival game, then magic books must exist too. Despite this, he's certain that Cloyd Survival is just another version of Loyal Ground. Having collected all the loot in the house, Gene decides it's time to move on. The sun has already risen, and he needs to find a safe place quickly. While exploring, he comes across a house with its lights on. In a game like this, that could mean only two things. Either a rare item is hidden inside, or another player is present. Gene proceeds cautiously, knowing he has no idea how many others landed nearby. Whoever is inside could be a complete novice or a master. Positioning himself stealthily at the base of the stairs leading to the second floor, Gene prepares to strike using his crossbow and newly learned Black Starchy Palms. Even if his opponent is skilled, he feels he has a fighting chance. Sweat drips from his brow as he climbs the stairs one careful step at a time, minimizing noise and planning to attack from every angle. But when he reaches the second floor, he finds nothing, just a single lantern on a table by the door. Sensing a possible trap, Gene kicks the door open, yet the room remains empty. He inspects it thoroughly and realizes he's put on a show for nothing, but at least no one else is there. On the table with the lantern, Gene opens a drawer and discovers a ring, the Ring of Strength, an item that boosts the wearer's strength by 20 points. He equips it immediately and feels his body lighten, making the heavy crossbow much easier to handle. Curious about the exact stats, Gene opens his status panel. Although his numbers still seem modest, he's officially classified as a martial artist thanks to the skills he learned from the book, a huge improvement from when he started. Thrilled by his progress, he heads downstairs to continue looting. There, he finds another item, a subspace ring, which allows the user to store and retrieve items from a pocket dimension. Once equipped, the system explains how it works. By saying or thinking the word subspace, the user opens the portal, then touches the ring and thinks of the item they want to retrieve. Essentially, it functions like a portable inventory, replacing the need for a backpack. Gene tests it out, awkward at first, but surprisingly convenient. Despite everything feeling so unreal, Gene can't help but wish he could bring all these items, martial arts, and powers back into the real world. To check on the progress of other players, he opens the kill log and notices that only one person has been eliminated so far. Proof that the game is just beginning, and survival will be far from easy. Gene had planned to farm until only 90 players remained, but exploring houses had already netted him a wealth of consumable items. He was even lucky enough to find several hidden weapons, perfect for combining with his Black Starchy Palms. He debated whether to move immediately or wait until sunrise, knowing that the strong players he had seen in the waiting room were most dangerous under the cover of darkness. At his current level, he couldn't take them head-on, but if he survived and climbed into the top 10, he could start allocating points effectively, just like today. With that in mind, he decided to loot one more house under the safety of night, when fewer players were active. As he moved, Gene noticed he wasn't even tired, a testament to the incredible power granted by the Ring of Strength. Yet, despite his enhanced strength, he still felt hunger and thirst, a stark reminder that Cloyd's survival mirrored reality in many ways. Starving, he wondered if he could find food in the city and began heading into the forest. According to his map, the city should be nearby, but no buildings were in sight. Suddenly, a low growl pierced the silence. Instinctively, Gene dove behind a tree, his heart racing. The sound wasn't human, it came from a werewolf. Two of them were prowling the forest, and one quickly spotted him, launching an attack. Gene narrowly dodged, stunned that monsters like these existed in the game. Panic surged as he bolted through the forest, cursing himself for not expecting such threats. Pride fueled his sprint. At last, he spotted a house in the forest and dashed inside, slamming the door shut. But the werewolves weren't so easily deterred. Peeking outside, he saw them sniffing around, trying to track his scent. Deciding to strike first, Gene drew his heavy crossbow and eliminated one werewolf with a single-handed shot, thanks to the Ring of Strength. Only one remained. Before Gene could aim, the second werewolf had already detected him and lunged. He barely evaded the attack and fled for a safe distance. This one proved smarter than the first, blocking his crossbow shots with its foot and counterattacking fiercely. On the verge of death, Gene refused to give up. He opened his subspace ring, pulled out a dagger, and unleashed his black starchy palms. The strike connected perfectly, finally killing the werewolf. Breathing heavily, Gene muttered to himself, "I can't afford to lose to a mere underling." Gene finally allowed himself a breath of relief after the intense battle with the werewolf. Thanks to the stash of throwing daggers he had prepared earlier, he was able to eliminate the creature efficiently. Once the threat was gone, Gene noticed a mob drop on the ground. It turned out to be simple food. He ate it to restore his energy, then scanned his surroundings and discovered a piece of armor resembling the bulletproof vests from Loyal Ground. Though initially large, the armor, named the orichalcum breastplate, magically adjusted to Jin's body and significantly increased his resistance to both wind and fire magic. Opening his stats panel, he was amazed by the boost to his attributes. As he continued exploring, his knee accidentally hit something hidden. Picking it up triggered a system notification. It was a night cloak. When equipped, staying still in darkness rendered Gene completely invisible. Magic detection would fail, and even the sounds he made were suppressed entirely. Gene was thrilled. This item was perfect for surviving undetected during nighttime, allowing him to avoid confrontations entirely. Feeling confident, Gene realized the mysterious house in the middle of nowhere had actually been a prime farming spot. Luck seemed to favor him as he ventured into the forest again on the second day. Hours passed without incident, and Gene began to wonder if he had landed in a random, uneventful location. Suddenly, he heard rapid footsteps approaching and instinctively hid to observe and plan his next move. He saw a man sprinting frantically, clearly fleeing from a mage while cursing himself for a previous action. After a short distance, the man stopped and muttered to himself. Gene prepared to attack, thinking the man looked weak enough to handle. Yet, no matter how he tried to pull the trigger, he couldn't convince himself that anyone here could actually die. After all, this still felt like a game. Before he could decide, the pursuing mage appeared. The moment the mage locked onto the black-haired man, he struck, and the man was instantly killed. Gene stayed hidden, carefully observing what happened next. To his relief, there was no remains, only a chest where the man had fallen. This confirmed to Gene that everyone here was indeed inside a game. The chest would contain the fallen player's items, but the source of the mage's attack still puzzled him. As Gene scanned the area, he noticed the mage now standing right beside him. Bragging about his own strength, the The mage turned toward the chest to claim the fallen player's items. Watching this unfold, Jean realized the harsh truth. The person who had died was a player just like him. If he hesitated too long, he could easily become the next target, and someone else would rise in rank by eliminating him. Survival in this game depended on making swift decisions, and Jean knew he couldn't afford to wait. Realizing that survival meant taking the initiative, Jean decided to strike first. However, the mage had already cast a barrier, which blocked his initial arrow and alerted him to Jin's presence. Frustrated by the disruption, the mage tried to remain calm, but Jean quickly attacked again, only to find the barrier still holding strong. Seeing his barrier under pressure, the mage panicked slightly and began casting attacks at random locations, thinking the enemy was nearby, though there was no one there. Seizing the opportunity, Jean attacked from a different angle, finally shattering the barrier into pieces. Landing on the ground, he was spotted by the mage, who immediately tried to counterattack. Acting swiftly, Jean struck back with a dagger using black star-chi palms, eliminating the mage. A chest appeared where the mage fell, signaling loot had dropped. Knowing that lingering could be dangerous if other players arrived, Jean decided to loot quickly and move. From the mage's chest, he collected gloves, a medium healing scroll, and Urko's necklace, a pure gold item marking the wearer as a mage from the Escrow Magic Society. While Jean didn't dwell on the necklace, he decided to stash it for now. From the fallen player's chest, he also acquired a circle stone, which allowed him to engrave a magical circle over his heart to use mana and learn a spell. Jean realized this explained why the other player had been running. He had been trying to safely activate the stone. Determined to make full use of it, Jean stored the rest of the loot in his subspace ring for safety and set out to find a suitable location to activate the circle's stone. After locating an isolated house, he used the stone. The system warned him that during the process, he would remain completely motionless for 3 hours, unable to perform any other actions or use items, and would feel slight pain as the circle formed. Suppressing his screams, Jean endured the next 3 hours in intense discomfort. Martial arts had been relatively easy to learn, but mastering magic proved excruciating. When the circle was complete, Jean checked his status panel and discovered he now had 2 jobs, with mana at 30. Curious about the current state of the game, he opened the kill log. Shockingly, he saw that around 55 players had died since last night, and all of them had been eliminated by a single player, Nam Sagwon. Rewinding a few hours, Nam had been ruthlessly hunting down other players, showing no mercy even to those begging to remain in the top 90. His goal was clear. Every participant needed to know the name Nam and fear it. It was now day 3 of Cloyd's survival, and Jean sat quietly, reflecting on the notorious player Nam, who had defeated dozens of participants in a single night. Jean hoped to avoid crossing paths with him, but a thought struck him. If Nam continued dominating the game, it might actually increase Jin's chances of reaching the top 10. After all, the organizers had announced special rewards for those who achieved that rank. Jean speculated that the prize could include money, rare items, or even the ability to bring skills and items acquired in the game back into the real world. Calming his mind, Jean finished testing his newly learned magic. He could now see mana flow through his hands, a visual confirmation of his growing power. To further practice, he pulled out the Wind Ball magic book he had looted the day before. The book allowed him to create spheres of wind, with the number of spheres increasing alongside his power. Jean concentrated and cast the spell, producing 4 small wind balls. Initially disappointed by their size, he threw them and was instantly shocked. The spheres tore through a wall and revealing the immense destructive power he now wielded. Exhausted, he felt his mana completely depleted, forcing him to pause. As time passed, The restricted zone began appearing on the map, gradually shrinking the playable area. Jean decided to farm along the edges of the boundary, minimizing the risk of running into enemies. While moving cautiously through a town, he noticed an old man spying on him, seemingly intrigued by his actions. The man jumped down and began following Jean from a distance. Hours later, Jean reached a cluster of houses where the streets were littered with open chests. Sensing movement, he quickly threw a wind ball toward the source, but found no one. After the dust settled, he heard movements inside one of the houses, likely an injured player. Recognizing the danger of confronting someone who had survived this long, prioritizing his own survival instead, he donned his night cloak and moved toward the forest. Unaware of Jin's true position, the injured player cautiously stepped outside, taking a deep breath of relief. He believed he was safe, having avoided immediate detection. Confident in his survival, the player began looting the open chests. That's when Jean executed his plan. With perfect timing, he aimed his heavy crossbow and eliminated the unsuspecting player. It turned out Jean had used a clever strategy, luring the player out of hiding to ensure an easy kill while staying safe himself. Jean decided to loot the chest before moving toward the edges of the safe zone. But suddenly, the old man who had been following him appeared behind him, complimenting Jean on his skills. Startled and scared, Jean instinctively tried to run, but the old man quickly reassured him. He wasn't there to harm Jean. He only had a few questions. Jean cautiously tried to extract information, but the old man brushed it off, saying it didn't matter even if he told Jean. They were from different worlds. Despite this, Jean remained wary and hesitant, unsure of the man's intentions. The old man then asked if Jean had participated in anything like this before. He revealed that he had been observing Jean for some time and was impressed by how quickly Jean had adapted. From that, the old man deduced that Jean must realize this wasn't a real world. Jean was shocked. He hadn't even noticed the old man watching him and wondered how long he had been observing him. He admitted that while this was his first time in this world, he had played a similar game in his own world. Surprisingly, the old man had no concept of a game and found the idea fascinating. As the sun began to set and the moon appeared in the sky, the old man asked Jean if his world had a moon as large as this one. Jean explained that moons in both their worlds were smaller. Curious, the old man asked him to explain the game he had mentioned. Fearing an ambush in their current location, Jean suggested moving elsewhere, but the old man ignored him, grabbing him and warning him to stay silent. Otherwise, he would become a target for others. Then, with astonishing agility, the old man began leaping from branch to branch, carrying Jean along. At that moment, Jean had no idea what consequences this encounter might bring. Eventually, the old man took Jean to the tallest tree, where Jean explained the games from his world. Listening carefully, the old man commented that Jin's world sounded magical, but Jean corrected him. It wasn't magic, just a highly advanced civilization. The old man nodded, finally understanding why Jean had adapted to this survival game so quickly. Jean couldn't help but wonder how long the old man had been observing him. Like a reader following a story, the old man replied that he had been watching Jean from the moment he had been dropped onto the map. He had originally planned to enjoy the fresh mountain air for the next 100 days, but had grown curious about Jin's actions and decided to approach him. The old man assured Jean that he had no intention of harming him. Jean admitted that he still didn't understand why they had been brought here, and the old man questioned him again about the game he had played in his world, seeking more details. Jean explained that there are many ways to play, but the point is that it's meant purely for fun. Nobody dies for real. That's why he couldn't understand the motives of the supernatural beings who abduct people from other worlds. Even so, Jean was confident that this game held immense opportunities. Death here wasn't permanent, Players who were eliminated would receive a rank and rewards corresponding to that rank. He believed the rewards would include items, skills, and martial arts learned within the game, just like the robe, abilities, and techniques he had acquired so far. As they talked, Jean and the old man discussed people struggling in life. Jean noted that this game was a huge opportunity for them. The old man, on the other hand, seemed like a true martial arts master with a life free of such struggles, possibly even with followers in his own world. Jean, by contrast, had little use in his world, which made him see this as a chance to gain power and survival advantages. The old man laughed heartily at Jin's words and complimented him, startling Jean, since their conversation could easily be noticed by others nearby. During their talk, Jean discovered that the old man didn't even know how to activate the map. Jean shared tips and tricks useful in this world and listened to stories about the old man's realm. Before they knew it, morning arrived. With the old man's guidance, Jean safely landed on the ground. Jean decided that staying close to the old man would be the best way to remain safe. The old man then asked if Jean wanted anything in return, admitting that he had learned a lot from him. Without hesitation, Jean requested to learn some of the old man's martial arts, determined to survive until the very end. The old man warned him that while learning martial arts was possible, attempting it could also be deadly. The old man explained to Jean that to truly succeed in martial arts, one must usually pay a hefty price. He asked Jean if he was prepared for that. Jean, confident, replied that no one dies here. The old man seemed to forget that for a moment, then decided that another method, now possible, would be used instead. To begin, the old man placed his hand on Jean to sense his inner energy. To his surprise, Jin's inner energy was weaker than that of the old man's house servant. Jean felt embarrassed and reminded him that he had already said there was no concept of martial arts or inner energy in his world. Undeterred, the old man instructed Jean to sit in a lotus position and again placed his hand on Jin's head. He warned that Jean would feel pain akin to death, yet he would not be able to move. He needed to endure it, or he would die. With all his senses heightened, Jean felt the wind on his skin like sharp blades. He could even hear ants crawling on the grass. Suddenly, pain surged through every fiber of his body. After struggling to endure it, Jean succeeded, opening his eyes. The old man praised Jean for his endurance and revealed that he had now fixed the flow of qi in Jin's body, fundamentally changing it. Curious, Jean asked what would come next. The old man explained that he had slightly separated Jin's soul and created an inspiratory gate in that space. Normally, people absorb the world's qi solely through breathing. Now, Jean had a second gate, allowing him to intake inner energy beyond ordinary means. Jean still didn't fully understand, so the old man elaborated. Humans consist of body, mind, and soul, all held together by qi. When someone dies, qi doesn't vanish. It disperses. Nature absorbs the dispersed energy, continuing the cycle of life. Yet those who do so become unstable, and eventually, the harmony of their yin and yang collapses, causing them to lose their martial arts or even die. The mind technique the old man taught Jean allows him to absorb scattered qi like this, increasing inner energy safely. The old man explained that if Jean could eliminate others strategically over the 100 days, by the end, his power would reach extraordinary levels. After the explanation, the old man prepared to leave. Before departing, Jean asked for his name. The old man introduced himself as Jang Dokian. The mind technique he taught Jean was called the White Martial Physique Arts. Jean expressed his gratitude, and Jang advised him to practice deep breathing, as it would further strengthen his body. With that, Jang opened the map and vanished like a true master, leaving Jean to continue leveling up with his newly acquired martial art. Following his plan, Jean moved to the edge of the limited area. Being transported by Jang to the center had been instantaneous, but walking there took half a day. Eventually, Jean reached a small town and noticed one house with its lights on at night. He considered the two possibilities. Either the house was empty or a newbie had forgotten to turn off the lights. Jean cautiously entered and found it empty. He began looting, but only found useless items. Exhausted and realizing he hadn't slept since talking with Jang all night, Jean donned his hidden robe and finally rested. The next morning, the 5th day of Cloyd's survival, Jean was woken by voices outside his room. Alert! He grabbed his heavy crossbow, regretting his peaceful sleep. The intruder opened the door, thinking it was safe, but Jean was ready, aiming directly at him. The enemy blocked the arrow with his sword, forcing Jean to quickly fire daggers using black starchy palms. The enemy skillfully dodged and countered each attack, leaving Jean no choice but to charge. He forced the enemy to the ground, kicked the enemy's arm to make him drop his sword, and finally struck him down. Though the enemy pleaded for mercy, Jean knew they shared the same goal, survival. In this world, only the strongest could endure. After the recent player's death, Jean could finally perceive the chi the old man Jang had mentioned. It flowed into his body, flooding him with strength. Jean was stunned. Absorbing the chi of just one person made his body feel lighter and far stronger than before. Curious, he opened his status window and saw a new section called Inner Energy, which read only 20. He silently thanked Jang for granting him such an incredible gift. From that moment, Jean considered finding ways to gather chi without having to eliminate other players. Opening the kill log to check the remaining players, Jin's eyes widened in shock. Only 20 players were left, even though it had been just 5 days. At that moment, another player fell to Nam Sagwong, the infamous killer. The scene shifted to Nam, who looked disappointed at the fallen player. The player had approached Nam first, giving the impression of strength, but had failed miserably. Nam opened his status window and saw that 22 players remained. His gaze paused on Jin's name, which sparked a hint of recognition. Back to Jean, he realized the gravity of the situation. Nam had the most kills among all players. Jean knew he had to avoid him at all costs. He could barely handle minor fights, so there was no chance against Nam. Jean focused on finishing his farming before the restricted zone shrank further. From Orong's chest, the only valuable item he acquired was a refined troll's potion. The rest was useless junk. He reminded himself that if the opponent had had a stronger elixir or weapon, he might not have survived. Jean decided it was wiser to hide and survive until the number of players dropped. A week of cautious grinding passed, and Jean reflected on his early game luck. Most of his loot was insignificant, and he hadn't encountered many enemies since staying near the forest borders of the restricted zones. He was growing tired of eating werewolf meat. Now, on the 12th day of Cloyd's survival, only 20 players remained. Jean stood at the edge of the dangerous zone, reaching out his hand but wincing in pain. He knew he couldn't move freely there yet. For an entire week, the kill log had only recorded Nam relentlessly defeating other players. It seemed most players, like Jean, were hiding and playing it safe. As Jean traveled, he noticed smoke rising from the center of the zone, signaling a battle. The scene shifted to the fight. Multiple players had gathered, united with a single goal, to take Nam down. Calmly, Nam taunted them, effortlessly picking off even a lone player, remarking that it saved him the trouble of hunting them one by one. Since the players were ready to take Nam down, he knew they were also prepared to face the same brutal fate. After taunting them, Nam leaped into action, not to escape, as they expected, but straight onto one of the players, grabbing his face and taking it down in a single motion. The remaining players froze in shock, but Nam didn't pause for a second. He moved on, taking down the others with terrifying ease. The player count plummeted from 22 to 11, leaving Jean to wonder if Nam had some kind of hack. Nam casually remarked that the fallen players were weaklings who deserved to die. After leaving the area with the dropped chests, including a magic wand, that night, another elf arrived and immediately recognized the wand as belonging to Elizabeth, igniting a fury that made him swear an oath in the name of Escrow to avenge her. Now, with only 11 players left, Jean realized that if he survived a little longer, he could break into the top 10. But after witnessing Nam's chaos, he knew that surviving a raid boss level player like him required powerful items. Determined, Jean explored the forest along the edge of the safe zone and discovered a mansion, likely to be outside the safe zone by morning. The perfect final spot for a serious farming run. Cautiously, Jean opened the mansion's door and was stunned by its grandeur. Inside, he found Royal Guard's armor, but his strength was too low to equip it. Frustrated, he continued exploring and discovered an elixir that boosts inner energy, sparking hope that he might gain inner energy without relying solely on chi. He also found a martial arts book containing the secret technique Unstoppable Fist. Like the Circle Stone, Jean knew he would need to spend 3 hours in meditation to absorb the elixir's power. While exploring further, Jean noticed an underground basement and paused, curiosity piqued. Suddenly, an explosion erupted nearby, forcing him to leap for cover and hide under the bushes. Confused, he scanned the area and spotted the elf from the waiting room, now engaged in a battle with Nam to avenge Elizabeth. Nam, unfazed, taunted the elf, claiming that silencing him would reduce him to nothing, and dared him to attack. The elf's determination only grew, ready to kill Nam. Jin's jaw dropped in disbelief. This whirlwind of destruction was just a kid. The elf Escrow, a master of spells, taunted Nam, warning him to see how long he could keep talking. Escrow unleashed a lightning skill, striking toward Nam, but Nam dodged effortlessly. Frustrated, Escrow demanded that Nam face him head-on, just as Nam had done with Elizabeth. Nam realized quickly that Escrow wasn't just talk. His skills were real, formidable, and unlike anything Nam had ever seen, even in Zhongyuan. Since Nam kept evading his strikes, Escrow prepared a final move, a lightning storm. Nam, though shocked, stayed calm and dodged every strike before leaping into the air to attack Escrow. Yet his assault couldn't penetrate Escrow's barrier. Escrow swung his staff to strike Nam, but it turned out to be an illusion. Suddenly, the burning battlefield and calm atmosphere shifted. Rain began to pour. Jean watched in awe, realizing just how insane Escrow's magic was. Not only could he almost kill Nam, but he could also manipulate the entire atmosphere as if it were nothing. Unable to detect Nam, Escrow concluded that Nam had escaped. He shouted Nam's name, vowing to track and kill him. Meanwhile, Nam, slightly injured, retreated to recover, already planning revenge for the next encounter. Escrow eventually descended and vanished, leaving no trace of Nam. Thanks to Jin's cloak of hiding, Escrow never noticed him, allowing Jean to survive another day. With both Nam and Escrow likely gone for a while, Jean turned his attention to the underground space he had discovered earlier, a potential dungeon hiding treasure. He opened the door and found nothing but stairs, leading him deeper underground. Using the lantern he had grabbed while farming, Jean navigated the path carefully, noticing that no one had been there before. At the end of the passage, he entered a room that appeared to be a food storage. Disappointed to find no loot or combat opportunities, Jean settled for the jerky inside. Having eaten nothing but tasteless jerky since arriving, he finally enjoyed the food, though he wished he had rice to go with it for better flavor. Jean decided it was finally time to consume the elixir. He retrieved a martial arts book from his subspace, a manual for the unrestrained fist. This technique had been developed by a man named Manhwa in his later years. With a lifetime of combat experience, he poured everything into creating an unbeatable martial art. But having lost all 1,429 matches, he lived as a laughingstock, and the art vanished without disciples. Reading the description, Gene briefly regretted picking it up, but he knew it was better than learning nothing at all. He returned the book to his subspace for later and focused on the elixir. Though hesitant because of the pain he endured activating the circle stone, Gene reminded himself that strength was the priority and drank the elixir without further thought. Instantly, he could feel his dantian filling with inner energy, far beyond what he had absorbed previously. His body began sweating profusely, and his movements grew sluggish. He wouldn't be able to move for 3 full hours. After enduring the time in complete stillness, Gene finally opened his eyes, utterly exhausted. Having survived a week in the forest unnoticed, including the intense clash between Archmage Escrow and Nom, Gene felt a rare sense of pride and allowed himself to sleep. The next morning, he emerged from the underground food storage, which was soon to become part of the restricted zone. Checking the kill log, he was shocked to see that the old man Zhang had been defeated as well. As the restricted zone closed in on the mansion, Gene grimaced at the thought of reaching the top 10 in such a precarious way. The map was already shrinking, and since he could survive this close to the border, he decided to continue the strategy that had kept him alive so far. With few combat skills, careful ranking through survival and stealth remained his best option. While rushing toward the safe zone, Escrow suddenly attacked with a massive fireball. Using his detection spell, Escrow assumed he had found Nom, but it was a new face, Gene. Terrified, Gene activated his newly gained inner energy to move quickly, but ended up running straight toward Escrow. Escrow confronted him, demanding if he knew about Nom, and warned that if he didn't, he would be killed on the spot. Unbeknownst to both, Nom was hiding behind a tree, silently observing the encounter. Gene tried to talk his way out, denying any knowledge of Nom, but the moment was shattered as Nom appeared in the sky, charging at Escrow. Despite the attack coming from behind, Escrow's defenses automatically activated. Escrow immediately noticed that Nom had fully recovered, leaving Gene stunned and wondering where Nom had come from. Determined to finish the fight quickly, Nom punched Escrow, but Escrow blocked it with his staff, claiming that such simple attacks could never harm him. However, in the next instant, the strike lands on Escrow. Nom was using enhanced energy, specifically arm energy, a rare martial art few had mastered. This was the first time Nom had to use it in this world, and Escrow was the first person to witness it. Nom's strikes injures Escrow, preventing him from chanting any spells. Even Nom couldn't deny that Escrow was worthy of top 5 status, possibly even winning the game. But now, with Nom's intervention, that was impossible. Watching the intense battle, Gene realized how lucky he was that Nom had arrived, and decided to sneak away while both were distracted. Nom continued striking Escrow relentlessly, as Gene observed the supposedly invincible Archmage get utterly destroyed. His thoughts weren't fear of Nom or pity for Escrow. It was a strategic calculation. If he could absorb the chi of both of them, he could become incredibly powerful. At the same time, Gene noticed a meteor falling from the sky, heading straight toward their location. Nom froze in confusion. Realizing the danger, Nom ran for his life, while Gene regretted not fleeing sooner. The spell struck the ground with devastating force. One of the Black Elves noticed it immediately, recognizing that Escrow had cast it. Gene, caught in the blast, was injured and deeply regretted his hesitation. With the last of his strength, he pulled out healing scrolls from his subspace, scrolls he had meticulously prepared for moments like this. Thanks to the elixir he had consumed earlier, Jean barely survived. Even after healing, pain coursed through his body, forcing him to use every remaining scroll to finally stand again. Opening the kill log, Jean confirmed that Escrow had truly died. He felt a twinge of regret for not absorbing Escrow's chi. But there was nothing he could do. There was still no word on Nam's status, leaving Jean tense. Moments later, he heard Nam's agonized cries. Running toward the sound, Jean found Nam, severely injured and desperately begging for healing scrolls. Nam pleaded, offering to make Jean the winner if he helped him, claiming he had no items and no martial arts learned here. Jean ignored the desperate pleas, retrieving a dagger from his subspace, intent on taking Nam's chi and items to become the strongest player in the game. As Nam finally fell, Jin's body absorbed the overwhelming surge of Nam's chi. He could hardly contain his excitement. Jean felt an immense surge of inner energy flooding through him. Meanwhile, other players noticed Nam's death, leaving only 8 players remaining. With the strongest player gone, chaos was about to erupt, and the remaining competitors would now run rampant.